This is about the Civil 3D Data Shortcut API and provides some example code on how to use it, and then some examples of commands that have been created to utilize the Data Shortcut API. In this talk, we'll go over the introduction about what I'm going to talk about, demonstrate a command where you can create a toggle, so the user just has to push a button and then the Data Shortcut working folder and project is then set. And then we can extend that to then include the associate a project. I'll demonstrate how we can create data references, take data and put it into a drawing, and also how to create data shortcuts and take data from the drawing and make data shortcuts from them so we can use them in other drawings. And then I'll show some examples on tools that have been created at Caltrans to utilize this data shortcut API. If you need any help on how to set up Visual Studio, I've provided a video on YouTube, which I've linked to here. And then for this data shortcut API, it's only available in Civil 3D 2020.6, 2021.1, 2022.1, or 2023. So if you download the code and try it and it doesn't work, the first thing you want to check is to make sure you have a Civil 3D updated all the way. So the first thing I want to talk about is the data shortcut toggle. So we might save a drawing in maybe the phase 2 folder, and then we expect the user to set the appropriate project or working folder. And so here in this case, if I save it to the phase 2, my project is going to be the test B folder, and I want to use the underscore shortcuts, which is the folder used by Civil 3D to store the data shortcut information. So if I know if the underscore shortcuts folder is there, that then this is a project. Sometimes projects have multiple shortcuts. So in this case, the surveying group has their own folder. And I'll show how we can set it just for the engineer who's using the phase 2 folder, and then set it up for the surveying who will use both shortcut folders. So when we install Civil 3D and then Visual Studio, we set up some codes, and up here is just the references that I'm using. So it's going to be other code that this code is going to be relying on. So the most important one here is the autodesk.civil.data shortcuts, and that has the code for the data shortcuts API. I then have a class, and this class just needs to be referenced here if there's a command class. This just lets AutoCAD know which code or classes have commands within them. And it'll speed up the loading of the .NET DLL. The command method here tells AutoCAD what the command is, and my command name is going to be ds-toggle. And then we want to get the document, and the document in this case is the DWG. And then I want to get the editor in case I want to write anything to the command line. So as I program, I like to use methods to call it, so I have a cleaner code base and easier to step through steps to find what is wrong. And so here I've created a find shortcuts folder that's going to be based on the currently opened document. And then once I go get the shortcut folders, I then have a collection of them. Sometimes things go wrong, and so I'm going to put this within a try catch block. And this is just some error catching where if there is an exception, something went wrong, I can write to the command line what that error message is. Here's the find shortcuts folder code. And here I'm getting the name. And in this case, the name is the full path of the drawing. So if I'm saved in phase 2, it's going to be the drawing name plus the path. The path.get directory name using the drawing location provides me information about the phase 2 folder. And then I have a collection for the directory infos, and that's going to be just a class that I've created to store the information. The directory info allows me to get information from Windows about the phase 2 folder. And then I want to go and find all of the folders that are above the phase 2 folder that contain underscore shortcuts. And I want to stop when I get to the C folder. And so here I have the directory name, which is going to be the folder name. And then I'm going to continue on until I get to the root name, which in this case would be the C folder. So I'm going to search for an underscore shortcuts folder below the phase 2. And in this case, I do that by using the git directories, and I can include what the folder name that I'm looking for is. And in this case, there's nothing in the phase 2. So if the code finds any, it's going to add it to my collection of directory infos, and it's going to continue on. Before I exit this, since I'm reusing the directory info, I want to go ahead and assign it to the parent. And so that means I'm going to go from the phase 2 to phase 2's parent, which is the sewer folder. And once again, I'm going to look for the underscore shortcuts folder. I'm not going to find it. And then I'm going to loop through the parent again to design and look for the underscore shortcuts folder within the folders underneath the design. I'm not going to find anything, so I'm going to loop up to the parent again, to Civil 3D. Look in this folders. I'm not going to find any. And then I'm going to go up one parent folder to the drawing DB test. I'm going to find a shortcuts folder. And then in my code over here, it's going to go ahead and add that information to my directories info. And then it's going to loop again, and I'm going to end up in Civil 3D projects, and then loop again until I'm into the C folder. At which point this condition is met. And so the code is going to come down here and return the directory infos. So all I've done is crawled through the folders to find where my underscore shortcuts folder is located at. There are some cases where the user might save it in a folder that doesn't have any data shortcuts. If that's the case, the ini says, is there anything in this object? And if it's empty, then it's going to go ahead and write to the user, says, hey, I couldn't find any shortcuts. So once I get the data shortcuts, I can get the currently set working folder from the data shortcuts API. That's a static method on the data shortcuts class. And so it's just able to go and get that information from the currently set working folder. The working folder can have a backslash at the end of it. To make things consistent, this code of trim just removes any trailing backslashes in the path. And then that's going to be my working folder that is then cleaned up. Now that I have the working folder, and if there's only one of them, I'm then going to just set the data shortcut and then exit. So I'm going to go ahead and get the first one from the collection of the data shortcut directory infos that I found, or the underscore shortcuts folders. I'm going to go ahead and call a method that I've set up to take the information that I've collected and give me the working folder information. And that's going to be the folder above the underscore shortcuts folder. In the get working folder from directory info, I'm passing in that information that we collected. So in this case, maybe I'm in the deliverable folder and I've selected the underscore shortcuts folder. So here I have my shortcut directory information. I want to go from my parent, which would be the Civil 3D surveying, to its parent, which is the surveying, and then the full name is going to be the full path for this surveying folder. I'm then going to remove any trailing backslashes just to make everything consistent, and then return that working folder. So now I have my working folder. I just want to make sure that the working folder isn't already current. And so I'm going to look at the current working folder, and if it's equal to the working folder that I found, I'm not going to set it. And the reason why I'm not going to set the working folder again is because Civil 3D goes through all the projects. It recreates the XML file that stores the working folder and data shortcut project information, and I don't want to trigger that from happening again. So by doing this check, I prevent Civil 3D from going through that work. In the code, I want to go ahead and get the name of the folder, and I can do that by going to parent and finding the name of it. So down here, if I go look at my shortcut directory information within Visual Studio, I can see my parent is located here. and it's the test_a folder, and the name of that folder is located here. So that's the name of the folder, and that's what Civil 3D is going to be using for the current project name. And so I can get that information from the data shortcuts.get current project folder information, and then that's going to return whatever the current folder name is. And then I can do that same check. I can make sure that the project isn't currently selected. And if it's not currently selected, I can go ahead and set the current project folder to the project name that I found when I went through the folders. And then the last thing I need to do is I need to tell Civil 3D to update the data shortcuts node. And you can do that using the refresh shortcut node. I don't believe there's a API call to refresh the UI. And so I'm able to refresh the shortcut nodes or the working folders by using this command that I just send to the command line. And then I'll exit out of it because I'm just setting one data shortcuts project. So I can then go to Civil 3D, and I'm going to go ahead and take my currently open drawing, which is the default, and just go ahead and save it. Down here at the command line, I'm just running some Lisp code to save the drawing for me. And here I can see that it's given me a name. But down here, my working folder and my data shortcut aren't set. Now I could right click and set my working folder and set the data shortcuts project folder. But if I have a button, which makes it a lot easier, I can go ahead and just click. So I can go ahead and click the data shortcuts toggle button. It'll run the code going through the folders, and then it'll set the working folder for me as well as the data shortcut project. So instead of forcing the user to do the work, we can do the work for the user using logical values. In other cases, I might have multiple data shortcuts projects that people use. And in that case, I might have two _shortcuts folders that I might have. So the surveyor might save a file in the deliverable while they're doing their work, and they'll want to put it in the surveying data shortcuts folder. And then later on, when they do the deliverables to the designers, they'll want to go ahead and put it in this _shortcuts folders. We don't want to force the surveyor to have to set the data shortcuts each time. And so if we provide that toggle, we can toggle between the two working folders and the two data shortcuts project folders for them. So by doing that, this uses the same code that I showed in the first example. But in this case, I need to go find what the current index is and then add in one to it. So I can then set the next data shortcuts folder that it needs to be so I can toggle through them. So here I'm just going and grabbing that working folder from the directory info, just like I did last time. And I'm just doing I, which is the index of the _data directory info's list of items. And if the working folder is the currently selected one, then I can set my current index to say, hey, this is the one I should be using, and use the next one by adding one to it. And then down here, I'm just collecting the information just so I don't have to get the working folder again. So this working folder info just allows me to grab both the directory info and the string just so I don't have to get the working folder from directory info again. Once the data shortcut information is collected, I can then select the current index that I want to use the next one. So if it's -1, that indicates that I didn't find any data shortcuts, which indicates that I need to use 0 or the first one in the list. If my current index is greater than the count -1, that means I've gone to the last data shortcuts project and I need to go back to the first one. If it's any other number, then it's just going to be the current index that I found, which is one more than what is currently set. And then I can grab the working folder and the project name from that object. And then I can go ahead and set the working folder and set the current project folder using the Civil 3D API. And then finally refresh the data shortcut node by setting the command to the command line. And at the very end, I have some error catching that catches any errors that might occur. I can then go back into Civil 3D and create a brand new drawing. And for this drawing, I'm going to save it as a surveying drawing. And so at the command line, I can see that it saved it as EG_surface within the surveying folder. So here I have my AEC_test that from the previous example. And then I can run the data shortcut toggle command again. And now it's the surveying folder. And I can click the data shortcuts toggle again, and it's going to go and find the other data shortcut folder. And now I'm back to test B. And so that way, when the surveyor is delivering it, they just have to check their working folder. If it's in the wrong folder, they can then just hit the data shortcuts toggle button and have it go back to the other project, saving the surveyors some time instead of having to do it manually. I'm going to go ahead and close all these drawings and go back to the PowerPoint presentation. As we're setting up our projects and creating a brand new drawing, we usually go through some common steps. And so the goal in this next example is to automate the setting the working folder, setting the data shortcuts project folder, and then associating the project to the current drawing. And the benefit of associating the project to the current drawing is that as you switch between drawings in different projects, the data shortcuts node will automatically update for you. So you don't have to automatically do this. So we're going to automate all this based on where that drawing is located at. So here I've created another command called set ds and associate to project. I have that same basic housekeeping code at the beginning. And now I have that same code to go find the shortcuts folder. So by using the methods, I'm able to reuse the code, and it makes it a little bit easier to read. And then once again, I have a check. Hey, did I find any of those shortcuts folder? And if I didn't, send that message to the command line, letting the user know. And then I can get the working folder. Remember, I'm just trimming the end of it just for proper housekeeping to make the paths consistent. And then in this example, I'm not supporting multiple folders, and so I'm just letting the users know that I found too many. In real life production, you'd modify the code to meet your requirements. And then I can set the working folder like I did previously, checking to make sure that it's not already set. And then I can get the data shortcuts project name, get the current project folder set by Civil 3D that's current, make sure that it's not already set. If it isn't set, then set the project appropriately. When you associate the data shortcuts, you want to get the data shortcut project ID from the Civil 3D API of the data shortcuts class. And you just want to pass it the full name, and then it'll give you the data shortcut project ID. And then we can pass that to the associate DS project. And this is going to just use whatever drawing is currently open in the editor. And then at the command line, I'm just writing a message letting the user know that the drawing was associated to the project. And then I need to update the data shortcuts node and have some error catching. So I can go back to Civil 3D, go ahead and create a brand new drawing. I'm just going to go ahead and save the drawing. And I'm going to save it within the Phase 2 folder for the Phase 1 sewer C Street start drawing. And so then the user can just hit the Set Data Shortcut and Associate to Project button. And it's going to go find the working folder, assign the data shortcuts, and associate it to the project. I can tell it's been associated because here I have the folder that it's associated with. And then up on the title bar, I have in brackets the I have the ACEC_test_A, which matches the project here. So it's been associated to the project. Down at the command line, I can see the data shortcuts project ID that's been associated to the current project. And so instead of doing a bunch of steps for the user just has to hit a button and they're done with their steps. We can also automate creating references. So if we have lots of alignments and surfaces and pipe networks to bring in and corridors, it can be a little tedious to right click and create a reference for all of them. When we can just create a button that creates the data shortcuts and possibly even assigns the appropriate styles to them. So to do this, I created the create data references command, and this is just housekeeping that's the same from the previous commands. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to get the data shortcut information from the Civil 3D API. And you do that by running the create data shortcut manager method, and you pass it a bool value that indicates if Civil 3D was able to create the data shortcut manager. And the data shortcut manager has all of the information for the currently open drawing on what data shortcuts can be created and what the current node has available to bring into the current drawing. If it's false, so Civil 3D wasn't able to create the data shortcut manager, we just write a message to the user letting them know. Most of the issues for that, not having a working folder and project set. These are the methods and properties available for the data shortcut manager. And they're items for getting the parents and the children for items. There's some tools to repair data shortcuts. And there's even an indication if the data shortcut manager is expired and you should probably recreate it. Down here we have exportable items and published items, and those can be items. These are classes that that can be exported to a drawing or published to the data shortcuts node within Civil 3D. So in order to get the published items, we just need to go get the list of the items, and we do that by getting the published items at count. And then we use that index or I value to get the information about that published item. And in this case, it's just writing that information to the command line as a demonstration of what information you can get from that. And then finally, it creates the reference and brings the object within the drawing, just like you can do in the user interface in Civil 3D. And these are the properties available for the published item within Civil 3D's API. And then we have some error catching at the very end in case something goes wrong. So in Civil 3D, I can go ahead and create a brand new drawing. I can select a project with information within it. And in this case, I just have some surfaces and an alignment and a pipe network. And I can go ahead and run the create data references command. I can do zoom extents, and then that's brought in all that information. In this case, I haven't set up the code to stylize the information, but if I had, you could expand this to assign the correct style based on the object's name and save the user some time rather than having to right click, create reference, and do them one at a time. And then we can also create data shortcuts. So take information that's in the drawing and bring it into the data shortcuts node within Civil 3D. So to do that, I've created a create DS's command, and this is the command name that is being used. This is the same common housekeeping that needs to be done for all the commands. And then here, I want to create that data shortcuts manager again, and once again, check to make sure it was created correctly. I can do a similar method of getting the exportable items, and these are items that are exportable to the drawing. I can then get information about it. such as the name, description, and type. And then in order to do this, you set the selected item at index to true, and that indicates that you want to bring it in. So you go through and indicate all of the data shortcuts you want to export, you set it to true, and then you check in the data shortcuts manager for Civil 3D to then process that information. Here's the methods and properties available on the exportable item. And then to apply the change, we save the data shortcut manager by passing in the data shortcut manager object. And then we can refresh the data shortcut node using the command line method. And if there's any errors, the error messages catch it. So I can open up Civil 3D and then open up a drawing with data shortcut available objects. I've gone through the test_C project and removed all of the data shortcuts so I can recreate them. And then I can run the create data shortcuts command and have Civil 3D go ahead and create all of those objects. And then I can expand it and bring those objects within the data shortcuts node. In this demonstration, I'll show some tools that Caltrans has created using this data shortcuts API found in Civil 3D. When a user creates a drawing at Caltrans, they get prompted to set the coordinate zone settings for the drawing. And so they can go ahead and press yes to open up the dialog box. On the project tab, it goes and finds the projects that are available based on the dsys variable location. And we use that to help share projects between districts where they might have a different drive letter. And so this allows them to set their drive letter location and then be able to have a different dsys variable for each district or user. And here on the left-hand side, it goes and finds all of the projects that are found at the dsys variable location, and the user can select which project they're creating a drawing for. They can choose what functional group they're designing for, and then what type of object that they're going to be creating, and it automatically puts it in the standard folder of where it needs to go. It then uses a naming template where the user can select and turn off different values for the name so they can have some standards. So I'm going to do alignments, and I'm going to call this B1. And it automatically builds the drawing name for the user. Once the drawing is saved, it'll then set the working folder and the project for the user and associate the drawing to the project. So they no longer have to do that step manually. On the next tab, this doesn't use the data shortcuts API, but it just demonstrates how we grab the survey coordinate information from the survey deliverable, and the user has an option to attach it as an external reference. On the next tab, they can set some custom properties, and these are used in our reports, so it grabs the information from the drawing properties and adds it to the information. There's a drop-down where a user can save their settings and then reload them for their project files. Down below, there's an option to run the ctmass data reference command, and this allows the user to bring in data shortcuts based on the project that they've selected. So I'll go ahead and hit set zone. And the command's going to go ahead and save the drawing, which it already has here, I can see. It's going to attach the external reference. It's going to move the copyright statement that we use at Caltrans. And it's going to set the working folder and the project. And open the ctmass data reference command that allows the user to select what objects they want to bring in to the drawing from the project nodes. Here, the edge of traveled way, the edge of traveled way style, the appropriate label set, and then the profile view style that needs to be used. There are some settings that the users can set up. And so here I have the ETW, and it's finding if that string is in the name, it's going to use this style, label set, and profile view style. And there's settings for each one of the objects that the user might need to bring in. The user can also have different sets, so the design might have different styles from survey, And so they can go ahead and select which one they want to apply, and the styles all update. Down here, the user has an option to run the CT profiles command, and that allows the user to quickly create surface profiles. So once the user hits OK, Civil 3D is going to go and import in all those data shortcuts or data references that the user has selected. And then the user can set which alignments they want to create profiles for. And so the user can uncheck the ones. So maybe I don't want ones for the ETW, for the offset alignments. Maybe I just want the centerline alignments and the miscellaneous. On the next tab, they can select what surfaces they want profiles created from and what style to use. So if I want the FG, I can go ahead and change that to finish grade. On the next tab, they can create profile views, and so they can select what profile view style they want, the vertical spacing, and if they want to create a label that shows the alignment name within it. And then the user can press create, and then they can choose to have the profile views stacked, or they can pick where they want them to go. And then I can pick a point within the drawing, and now I have profile views created for all of my alignments, as well as the surface profiles. Another example is creating sample lines. We typically want our sample lines and section views in a separate drawing from the corridor because of drawing performance issues. This was long, laborious steps of like 20 to 30 minutes for a user to do. And so there's a better way if we use the Civil 3D API for data shortcuts. And so there's a CT sample lines command where the user can run the command. It'll show the user where the sample lines are being created. They can save the section drawing, so it's going to automatically go in the correct folder. They can give it a name. And so this is going to be CD1 and D2. And so they can put the name within the name folder, within the name text box. And then it's automatically suffixed with cross-section as DWG. On the next tab, they can set any custom properties that they want in the cross-section drawing. And then they can choose which sample lines that they want created, and if they want section views created as well. And then they can choose how wide they want the cross-sections to be. So if I want to do 120 on the left and 120 on the right, it's going to automatically update the values. Additionally, in this area here, I want a longer width on the right and a shorter width on the left because I don't want to double count quantities. So the command is smart enough to know to not overlap on the corridor sections. And so it'll automatically use the 240 feet, but split it up appropriately so it covers the entire corridor extents. On the next tab, the user can select what sections they want created. And then they can choose what view settings that they want and what annotation scale they want in their section view drawing. Down here, it gives some information on the expected widths and the maximum section width here. So the user can quickly see if there's enough room for the sections. And they can also click adjust to width to adjust it to what the maximum values are. Then they can choose create. It's going to clean up the line work within the corridor drawing. It's going to create a cross-section drawing. It's going to create all the necessary data shortcuts. It's going to then create the data references within the cross-section drawing, create the sample lines, and then open up the drawing once it's done. So it's using the Civil 3D API to help automate the steps so the user doesn't have to do it manually. So it takes a 20 to 30 minute task and boils it down to 30 or 40 seconds. And so once it's done, we can see that the cross sections have been created, the labels have been added. We have some borders for the sheets, and we have an mtext object, shows the users the section view, the alignment, and all that information so they can quickly find which is the appropriate group of section views that they want to see. And if I expand in Prospector, I can see that it's created data shortcuts for the alignments and profiles and corridors and brought in the information that is required to show on the cross sections that the user selected. And so these were two demonstrations of what is possible using the Civil 3D Data Shortcut API. You can download the source code from GitHub using the address on the screen. If you want to email me, you can use the email on the screen. And I have more crappy YouTube videos on other topics at the YouTube channel on the screen. Thank you for watching,